I'm live streaming. It's happening
Okay.
slowly but surely. It's almost there.
Okay. And I
We can
started.
start it.
Yeah.
You want to start? Yeah. Start.
Yeah.
Start.
Start
Okay,
there.
and we're live. Just make sure that we are muted. Yes.
And here come folks.
Here
There's
they come.
Carly.
And there's
Phew.
Carly.
Hello.
Can you hear us now, Carly?
Yes. Okay, good. I'm glad I retried that. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Sorry.
Phew.
Oh,
Technological issues.
cool. Okay, so
Alrighty. We're just gonna let people connect and then we'll spiel and then we'll do the thing.
sounds good.
Very exciting.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Happening.
Okay.
All right,
So we,
spiel.
yeah, go for it.
Okay, here we are live at the Loom again. It's the Janet and Carly show, and I will be switching between them as we go. And feel free to ask questions in the Q&A interface, please. Use the chat just for chat. It's hard to track down questions in there. I've turned on closed captioning, so you should be able to see that if you turn it on rolling across the bottom of your screen. You can also turn on the full transcript so it doesn't just disappear off the edge of your screen. You've got everything that's been said all the way from the beginning. No questions are stupid. Let's have fun. And I'm
Perfect.
going to hide away in moderator space. And I think we're going to start with spotlighting you, Janet. Is that the deal?
Yeah, and I'm gonna share my screen, so I don't think you need to spotlight.
Okay.
I'm gonna talk people through my threading.
Okay.
So you may recall last week I was winding my warp and keeping track of my stripes as I went. So let's see. This is what I want to show you. I updated, this is my actual stripe plan. And I'm gonna do something here. Let's see, add threads. And I'll add several threads so that you can see right here, oops, right there. I'll do some at the edge too. I'm gonna make those white so that it's easier to see right there. That is my center point between between the two halves. So sorry, here, let me just add some more. Oops, meant to make those white. Why did they turn? Apologies. There. And a few here at the outside edge. So you can see, I hope, that the two halves of my warp are identical. Often when I do a folded warp, so that the two halves of my warp are identical, I mirror the two sides. So that would be taking the colors on the right half, for example, and flipping them horizontally like so, so that the warp is symmetrical and the right half is a mirror image of the left half. And then I'd often leave out those threads in the middle here, for instance, to make just one big pink stripe down the center. This time I decided not to do that. I wanted to make things look a little more syncopated, a little less samey symmetrical all the way across. So I left my stripes the same orientation on the left and the right, not mirrored. And then I also wanted to add the ecru. Remember, I have that light ecru color. I wanted to make things a little bit whiter. I actually decided I quite liked the warp without the ecru in there, but I had already promised that I would show people how to interleave two warp chains, so I decided I'd stick some ecru in there, and I played around with various placements of the ecru and various stripe widths. So let's see, here's a version I came up with. Oh, let me clear the tie up and look at the opposite side. So you can see I've got a skinny stripe here and a skinny stripe there and 4 threads there and 4 threads at the sides. And I played around with various things, and I realized at one point that I didn't need to insert the ecru into the same places on the left side and the right side. So my eventual design, this is what I came up with in the end. And once again, I'm going to clear the tie up and look at the opposite side so that you can just see the warp stripes. I put a fair bit of ecru on the selvages. I have decided I am probably going to weave with a dark brown, so I added a little bit of dark brown at the selvages too, so that I wouldn't have high contrast weft and warp right at the selvage, because that tends to look messy, tends to show up any problems that are at the selvages. So I thought I'd hide those. If I decide not to use the dark brown weft, I can just drop those extra threads, no harm, no foul. And then everywhere but at the selvages, I inserted either 2 or 4 ends of the ecru, and I decided that wherever they were, I was going to thread them as basket weave. And I also made the decision to, wherever I had a 2-end stripe rather than a 3-end stripe, to also thread it as basket weave, with the exception of this pink one right here, because then I'd have a bunch of basket weave in it. I'd have 3 in a row, and I decided I didn't want to have 3 in a row, that 2 was my max. So if I undo, and so that you can see the structure again, you'll see I've got these stripes changing direction each time the color changes, except for in those 2-end stripes or the ecru 4-end stripes where it's basket weave. And that is my threading plan. I also I've been noodling on how I'm going to slay this, because as I've been working on the rough slaying, which you'll see in just a minute when I run downstairs to my loom, the pink is quite a bit heavier than even than the copper, and the copper is heavier than the thick and thin. The thick and thin multicolor is quite a bit finer especially than the pink, and the ecru is also heavier than the copper, but not as heavy as the pink. So what I have done is wind 2 chains. I wound the stripes like this, well, like we saw a minute ago, the 2 halves as a folded warp. And then I also wound a folded warp out of the brown and the ecru. So I came to, let's see, colors, get thread counts. I needed a total of 30 ends of ecru, and this says 4 ends of brown. I decided when I was winding that the brown was really very fine, so I doubled that up. So instead of having 2 at either selvage, I have 4 at either selvage. So because it's a folded warp, I made it the same length as the other folded warp, which was 6 yards. I used the same guide string, and I wound all the threads I needed of the brown at the selvage, and then half of the ecru threads, so that when I folded them up, I had all of the ecru threads and brown at both selvage. So my situation right now is that I have 2 folded warps, one that is the pink and copper and multi and gold, and one that is the ecru and the brown, and I am I've slayed the first half of my pink copper sparkly one, and when I get down to the loom, I'll explain what I'm doing as I'm rough slaying, and I'll finish that, and then I will do the second warp, which is the ecru and brown. Okay, lots of words. I'm going to sign off from this computer and dash downstairs and rejoin you from a different camera in a few minutes while Carly talks about what she is doing.
Perfect.
So I am pretty much ready to go. I just got my loom put off. I think you can sort of see it right there. I put it into position. I use hand weights to keep my loom stable while I direct warp. And what's been working for me in this room is actually, you can't really see it in the camera, but there's a doorknob right here. And I love using doorknobs as pegs. So especially with a narrow warp like this. So I'm just getting my materials together. This is kind of the anti-plan, which is why I was attracted to this loom to begin with, is just so you could just jump in and make all these decisions. I did do my spinning, So I have my my hand spun yarn that I need to put into a ball. I have about 30 yards of this. So that means I have enough to do about 10 loops, maybe a few less. Maybe I'll plan around 8 different loops. So that's going to be 16 different little hand spun zingers. So right now I'm thinking about how I want to highlight those, especially if my work is going to be, it's not going to be super wide, but it's going to be like maybe 14 inches wide. But now that I have it all set up, I'm realizing that this yarn right here is probably going to be too thin to run singly on the 12 EPI heddle. It's just sort of an intuitive feeling I have once I see the heddle and I see how thin the yarn is. I'm like, oh yeah, that's not going to quite work the way that I thought it was going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and actually double this as I work. So this is going to be, the background color is going to be this doubled bamboo 7, which I think is around a 5.3, I think, or 5.2 is what we decided. And it's going to be one strand of these, and every other strand is going to be one of my fancy colors. So, and then it's going to be sort of like a huck draft onto heddles. So I actually can get a lot of my working done as I direct work, which is really awesome, which is why I'm on the phone, so I can actually move the camera over so you could see what I'm doing. But I think that's it. I just have to ball this up and sort of come up with a generalized plan. You know, I might just sort of put my yarns actually like move you over a little bit, but I'll just sort of physically design it by looking at the different yarns and putting them into different orders. And I might pull out a couple strands of this yarn and then put this yarn next to it, put this yarn next to it. So it's not really like, you know, doing a wrap or anything, but I could kind of get a sense of how they're going to flow together. And I'm, you know, my decision making right now is like, do I want to do a pattern? Do I want to do 1, 2, and then this one and have it repeat? Or do I want to have it a little bit more chaotic? So I'm not sure which one I'm going to do. Usually what I try to do is I try to center on something that's definitely going to be in a place. Like I'm thinking this will definitely be somewhere in the center, and then the outsides can look a little bit different. And then I'll balance it as I thread it. Like as I see it go through the loom, I can react to what's going on. So anyway, so it's not a plan, sort of a plan. But it's just how I like to work. It's fun because I'll discover things I never would have designed, you know, or I never would have done on purpose.
Janet, you are muted. Can I do something about that?
Huh, am I muted still?
No, Janet was,
Oh, okay, good.
is.
All right.
Can I do it? Let's see. Uh-oh, she's gone away.
There, am I,
There you go.
am I,
There you go. You're coming in and out.
how about that? Can
Well,
you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you, but now I can't see you. There we go.
Okay,
Now I have both. Yep.
okay, good. Okay, sorry
And
about
now I
that.
can see the loom. Yep.
All right. On my screen, I am very tiny up in the corner, and all I see is the HA logo in the middle. But if that's just me, that's fine.
I'm going to spotlight you.
Ah, there. Okay. So here I am. This is my folded warp. This is the right half of my warp, and the second and the left half. I had crosses tied at both ends, and I put the crosses on the leaf sticks so that things were oriented the right way. And when I was estimating how I was going to slay these, I thought some would be at 12, some would be at might be at 10 or thereabouts, some might be at 14, some might be at 16. I'm not really sure, but of that group, 14 is somewhere in the middle. so I was trying to my plan was to rough slay my reed at about 14. And that would mean, since these are 1/2 inch sections, that would be, in theory, 7 per section. But I have continuous loops, which means these always come to me in pairs. So it's not a good idea, or at least I don't like to separate a loop between 2 sections, which means my sections always need to have an even number in them. So my rough plan was to put 3 loops, so 6 ends, and then 4 loops, so 8 ends. Then 3, then 4, then 3, then 4, so that things would average out to about 14 ends per inch. So I started out with the first 6 ends, and that's a copper and it's a couple of coppers. It's some of this stretchy gold, and then it's one of the pinks. And then I had a whole bunch of pinks, and I could tell when I lifted up 4 loops of pinks or 8 ends of pinks, that was going to be really packed into that 1/2 inch. So I decided, well, even though the pattern was 6, 8, 6, 8, 6, 8, I'm just going to do 6 and then 6 again in the pink and 6 again in the pink. And then this bunch, I had some finer thread, so I have 8 of those. And then I realized, hang on, here's my threading. When I work in the ecru and the brown, the first big group of it is going to be out here, like at the selvage. So I didn't need to leave space for that. And most of the way across, I'm only inserting 2 ends of ecru here and there. And I decided, well, that's fine. I'll just stick the 2 ends in where they belong, and I won't worry about whether that's a little bit crammed when I'm rough slaying. But there is one section here after this pink stripe where there's 4 ends of the ecru, and the ecru is pretty heavy. So I did leave a thin spot here where I can put those 4 ends. So I only have, I think there's 3 or 4 ends of my mixed warp there and that one, and 3 more there. I'll move things around to fit those 4 ends of ecru in there somewhere. And then I got to the multi, it's quite fine. So I put 4 loops or 8 total ends of that in wherever I found it. And I've just been kind of, aiming for 6 ends or 3 loops followed by 4 loops or 8 ends across. But if that seems like too much, I only put in 3 loops. And if it seems like not enough, maybe I'll stick in at 4, even if it was supposed to be a 6 or an 8. Anyway, I've done the first half, and now I'm going to do the second half the same way. And they're exactly the same. So there's no reason why I couldn't do the same thing, except this last dent here at the center, which is going to get to ecru eventually. It's still going to be awfully fine. So I'm going to put a couple of loops. There are 2 loops from the first chain or first cross in there. So I'll just put 1 more in because it's going to get those ecru. Oh, and here, look, this is one where I tied to the cross end, and I made that great big loop. And that is so that when I put it through the space, I can put it right over the stick, and then I can put it right over the apron rod rather than having to tie the ends together. And then let's see. So here's a continuous loop. I'll take 3 of those and I'll put them through the next spot, and so on across until I get to, there's this space here again after the wide pink where I'm putting 4 of the ecru in. So I'll leave a thin space there, slightly less full space there. But other than that, I'm going to follow this approximately 6 ends, 8 ends pattern across to the other side. And that's what I'm going to be doing until that's done.
Can you take questions while you're doing that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Joy Hogue says, if we vary the set for thinner yarns, but are weaving in twill, will the change in set on some stripes change this angle or size of the twill? Will a change in set from 22 to 24 be obvious?
I don't think you would see a big difference. Well, okay, wait. So the first question is the angle. Yes, there will be. If there's a significant difference in the set between one stripe and another, then there will be a visible difference in the angle. of the twill, because if your weft is, for example, 12 picks per inch, but your warp has only 8 ends per inch, then your twill angle will be shallow. If your warp has 16 ends per inch, your twill angle will be steep. And so if you have shallow next to steep, you'll see a difference. I know that's going to happen by also changing the direction of the twill at each stripe. I think that's going to be an enhancing thing rather than a something that detracts from the design. Will a change from 22 to 24 be obvious? If you mean, will the difference in the twill angle be obvious, it'll be pretty subtle. But it may be visible. If you mean, will you feel the difference between 22 and 24? Again, it will be subtle, but there would be a difference in the hand of the fabric if your warp was set one way versus another.
Okay, great. Sandy P says, to her eye, the slants on the wider stripes in your pattern stand out most and look awkwardly oddballish. Just her perspective. How much consideration do you give to this aspect? For a project I might do, what options would be good to consider? Adding an extra narrow stripe?
I'm having trouble understanding because some of your words are cutting out, or it may just be
I'm
me.
sorry. I'm sorry. Sandy thinks those wide stripes look oddball.
Because they're so much wider than the narrow ones?
I think maybe the basket weave, and let's see, she says adding or deleting the use of basket weave on a stripe, would that be good? Or adding an extra narrow stripe so the direction on the wider stripe would flip? I think she's jarred by the transitions, maybe.
Well, that's a personal design choice. You certainly don't need to make the stripes change directions. You can do the same direction all the way across, even if you have basket weave. You don't need to do the basket weave. Those are just choices that I made to make things a little more, well, interesting to my eye, but my eye does not necessarily match anybody else's. So don't feel like you need to follow suit in your project. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
I don't know yet. We'll find out.
Okay.
Let's see. I have two requests to enlarge you. And the problem, folks, if I enlarge Janet and get rid of Carly, she's got to rejoin the webinar from her iPhone while she's working. So it's really close to impossible.
Have you got me spotlighted though?
I do.
Okay, that's the best we can do. Yeah.
There's a little Carly on the top, so that's the best we can do. All right, let's see. Stephanie Ryan says, what does a folded warp mean?
Stephanie, we that's covered in the lessons, and there's a toolbox about it. There's a blog post about it, and I talked about it at length last week. So I encourage you to watch the recording from the last Live at the Loom. But briefly, it means that I have wound the warp twice as long as it needs to be, and only half of the ends with the cross at both ends, so that I can fold the warp in the middle and have two ends that are identical.
All right, so let's see. Someone's saying you're side by side and Carly is big as Janet, but that's kind of impossible since you're spotlighted.
It could be that they have not. You're doing spotlight, not pin, right?
Correct.
Okay. It could be that they have somebody pinned, or that they have set it to gallery view or something. Folks watching, you can choose who to pin, and that will make one person bigger than other folks. And that might help.
You can also change your view to speaker view, and so only Janet will show while she's talking.
Well, yes, but then you'll show when you're talking.
Oh, right. Even though, yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
just FYI, I have finished rough slaying the mixed warp here. And now I'm going to do the second warp, which I put is right here, my little ecru warp. And I need another set of leaf sticks for that. And I thought about simply putting the leaf sticks through the same cords, but then they're going to, they might interfere with one another. So I have another set of cords here I'm going to use for my second set of leaf sticks.
Two questions for you, Janet. Are you winding back to front? It looks like you're at the front of the loom.
I am dressing my loom from back to front. Back to front means that you beam the warp before you thread it, but you still need to rough slay before beaming. So I have, and you can rough slay either through a rattle or through a reed. I prefer a rattle. And so that will space my warp. And then I will beam it onto the back beam, followed by threading.
Teresa wants to know if you can show the folded part of the warp.
It is, let's see. So here are my two halves. Those are my two chokes. And I come along here. Oh, there we go. Here and here and here. There's the chain. And there's the fold in my warp. It's just a bend. I had put these two ties where I thought were, either side of the center point, but I didn't get them in quite the right spot. This orange one is pretty much bang on the bend. So once I get it beamed, this is the end that will be sticking forward, and I will cut them apart at that point or thereabouts. Here is my little bitty ecru and brown warp. These are the two halves. Let's see, hold things up so you can see them. Those are the two halves. You can see the crosses tied on both halves. And you might be able to see here that when I tie my cross, I always make one side one color and the other side a different color. And I make sure that at least one of them is the same on both. Like these are two whites. This happens to be two blues, but it would have worked just fine as long as they were two things that weren't white. And then I have the same over here on this cross. And that lets me know that I don't have a twist, especially when you have a tiny little chain like this. It can be very easy to get a twist in there. So if I held this like this and I have orange and white up, I know that that's twisted. It should be white and white up, or orange and orange down. So there, now I finally got it untwisted. So if I put all the whites on top, the way that I had it tied, there we go. Now they are mirror images with the browns on the outside of each section. So that is how I want to put, oops, get my thumbs back in there. This chain, the two crosses from this chain onto the leaf sticks for rough slaying the second half, which is what I'm doing right now.
Right.
Awesome. I need to go grab my kitchen scale, so I will be right back, if that's okay. I've got an idea.
Okay.
An idea.
Questions, anyone?
Normally when I do blending two chains together like this, they are both going all the way across the whole width and are pretty much evenly interspersed. That's not what is happening here, but I think the same method should work just fine. So we'll see. All right.
We're gonna do some quick math. This is just like a replacement or another idea that you can do if you don't know how much is on your ball and you don't want to do.
Why don't you switch back to Carly,
Okay.
Dawn?
All right, so down here. So I'm gonna weigh my little ball here. And it has 53 grams. No, 35 grams. 35 grams. I am going to see how many grams each pass is. And then I can divide that into the 35. So I'm going to do one pass of this. So bringing this one out, catching it there. Now I can weigh this again. So that was only about two grams. So if this was 35 grams, one pass was 2 grams. So that means I could, if I'm being very generous, that means I could do 15 passes. So now I have that information for planning as I work. So if I have 15, I can think, well, do I want to do 15 stripes going evenly? Do I want to do maybe 3 on this side, maybe 3 on this side and have some left over? But it's just I don't know, the way that I will do these calculations really quick on the fly without, if I feel overwhelmed with trying to figure out what's in every single ball. So I could do that to all my yarn as I go through, and then that will help me make decisions as I go. Let's see.
So,
I'm coming back to you.
okay. So now I'm fitting in my ecru where they need to be. And there's the brown selvage that I may or may not keep, plus 6 ends of ecru all the way outside the right selvage. So I put them over here in a totally empty space in my rattle. And then I needed 2 ends just on the right side of this wide pink stripe. So I fiddled things around. There had been a pink end in this in the dent, so that which I moved into the left dent so that there was a boundary between pink and not pink, and I stuck the 2 ends of ecru in there. And then I have a spot where I need 4 ends of ecru to the right of this skinny pink stripe, and I had, you may remember, left an empty or a loose spot in the rattle there, so I put those 4 in there. And then I need 2 more, which is pretty much at the center of my warp. What I have here is 2 plus a single orphaned end. That's where that was the end of my warp. I needed 15 ends, if you'll remember. So there was an odd numbered end. So that one I don't need yet, but this one's going to go somewhere right in the middle, which is, let's see, it is between a pink and a copper right in here. So I'm just going to plunk it down in the spot where I want it to live, which is right there, I think, or close enough. Now I want to make sure that my threads don't come out of the rattle. So I will protect them by putting the loopers across. And now I got to keep going. So on the right side of this wide pink stripe, I need 4 more ends of ecru. Well, here's the one. And I'll put in, sorry, on the left side. And now I'm into this other chain, which I can open up, and so on. I'm just going to keep feeding the ecru in close to where my threading plan needs it to be. Remember, this is rough sleighing, which means it's a rough draft. And if the threads are, to the left or right by 1 space in the rattle, that's not going to be a big deal. I can move them around when I get to threading and put them where I actually want them. So that's all I have for the next little bit. If Carly has things to show.
I could do a close-up of what my slate is doing. I don't
Okay.
know. That'll be interesting to everybody, but so I did this on my phone. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I was like, I couldn't see this. All right.
Yep.
So yes, of course, as I'm hopefully affectionately called Messy Carly. So everything here is messy. All right. I think that that is good. Okay. So you can see my two heddles here. So this pattern is one of those ones where I have it memorized because what I'm doing is I'm still threading it with a whole slot, whole slot, whole slot arrangement like plain weave. I'm just jumping my eyes or my holes from heddle to heddle. So this one's whole slot of this one, or eye slot of this one, then it goes eye slot of this one, eye slot of this one. So it's kind of hard to explain, but I would threading it just like I would if I were threading it for plain weave. I just know that when I go and thread my eyes, I'm going to move my eyes back and forth. Since this is already doubled, this is done. I don't have to separate these or do anything. So this is awesome because I know that if it's in a slot, it's going to be my background color. What I'm going to end up having to thread are my eyes. So this thread right here is going to go in through the eyes of heddle one. So I pulled a double layer through this eye. I'm going to leave this eye open. Then when I go to thread it, I'll just have to move one thread over to this eye and I'm done. Then it's going to jump to the back. So I skipped two eyes back here and I threaded it in this eye. So now when I go to thread this one, I just have to move one thread over to the next eye and then it's threaded. So it's a little bit of pre-planning, and it's just because I'm really familiar with this kind of structure. So I could kind of think ahead about how the easiest way for me to thread. So I'm really liking these stripes. I love being able to just see the warp kind of come alive as I warp. It's really fun. So this one, I've got two in the front, two in the back. So I'm skipping these two eyes. Then we're going to do two in the front again. So it looks like I'm going to be skipping three eyes. So that's my pattern that I'm trying to go for. I have to find the right hole or the right slot in the back. So I know I'm skipping this eye right here. It's going to go through this slot. And if I misthread any of this, it's okay because I'm going to actually thread it for real. I'm just trying to get myself as set up for success as I can when I go to actually thread. Sorry about my arm in the way there. So let's see, I'm gonna do maybe what's in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe I'll do 4 stripes of this. Or should I do 5? I'm gonna do 5 actually, because odds are sometimes a little bit more appealing to the human eye. So I am just threaded my backs. Wait. Oh, I should have. Okay, so I actually missed the eye here and I put it in slot. That's okay. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the front. So I'm going to this slot, skipping these two eyes, and then I'm going to pull it through this eye. Perfect. I'll do one more pass. And you'll notice that this looks like a mess. It is a mess. But remember, it's just a short warp. So I can pull this and hold the tension as I wind on. It's not really quite enough. Like, yeah, it can tangle, but it's very, very short. So it's, I don't have to be as careful with it as I would be if it was a very long warp. How long is your warp, Janet?
It'll be 3 yards. Well, now that it's folded, it's 3 yards. I wound it 6 yards on the warping board, but that's so that I could fold it in half and get 3. And we'll see how long of a scarf I get out of that.
Janet, I'm going to pop over to you because I've got some questions for you.
Okay. Before I field them, I will go ahead and spotlight me, and then I will tell you a little bit about what I was doing just a second ago. I realized that I had missed an ecru stripe, so or, you know, two ends should have been in. So I had to take things out and rearrange things. And I also, I had that one single end that was the odd ball, the odd end at the end, but all of my stripes are in 2s and 4s. So I made the decision, rather than trying to split those loops apart, I made the decision to take that single one out of the cross, keep my loops all together, and then at the end, when I was one thread short, I fed the single one in there, which means I have one end that goes from the very left edge of the right half of the ecru chain all the way to the left edge of the left half. And I hope I don't run into trouble because of it, but we shall see. Okay, what were the questions?
The question is, let's see, Mary Wood says the ecru and brown threads are all going to be at one side of the apron rod. Will you need to redistribute them once you attach the two apron rods so they're more in correct alignment?
They are going on 2 separate apron rods, and you'll see that in just a minute. That's my next step. But okay.
So that goes with Joy Hoag's question, which is basically the same thing.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to move I have everything rough slayed now. Things are still on this stick. I'm going to move my camera to the back in just a second. But in case it's not clear, like the camera angle isn't clear, what I'm going to do is put all of the brown and ecru on one apron rod and all the multicolor on a second apron rod. All right.
All right.
So here, sorry, hope I don't make anybody seasick. Is that, let's see, I was gonna lift that up a bit. Do you have a good view of the back of the loom there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have 2 different apron rods back here ready to go. And I'm going to use the first one to scoop up the brown and the ecru from my warp stick at the front. A little fiddly to make sure I've got all the brown in the ecru and nothing but the brown in the ecru. And this is where I wish I had 3 hands so that I could set this down somewhere safely while I do the same with the other one. In hindsight, I should have probably taken the multi and attached it to the back beam before I slayed the brown and the ecru. So let's see. I'm just going to figure out some way to hold these on here securely. Loopers to the rescue. I don't want to loop them over the rattle and have them get all hooked up. So let's see. I'm just going to hook them on there a little bit. All right. Now I'm going to take, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the other apron rod to get all the multicolors.
So Sheila Roberts is asking, why are you using 2 apron rods? Couldn't you use just one?
Well, but then you wind up with the situation that Mary and Joey were asking about, where all of one warp is on like the left side and all the other warp is on the right side. And this, again, this is a maneuver that I have mostly used like when I'm doing a double faced warp and I basically have 2 separate layers or a double weave warp. So it's not like you can just easily intersperse them. I could at this point, yes, I could, because there are so few ends there, I could figure out where they belong on this apron rod. But my goal was to demonstrate what I do when I have 2 separate chains that I'm treating separately. So I'm just going to continue on with this maneuver, and we'll find out in the coming weeks how successful it is. So here's my first apron rod. and I will attach it to my back beam. And then I'm going to pull the second one back and do the same. One thing I want to point out is that it's important that the two apron rods be fastened together so that they can't slip towards the end when you're weaving and you get, the rods come up off the back beam. In this case, they're both going to be attached to a rod that is attached to the beam. But had I just hooked these rods into the cords, for instance, and then I did the same with the second one, then those could shift in relation to one another. So it's really important to attach them together. I may do that in this case, even though they're already going to be attached to a third, just for extra security. I'm not sure it's necessary, but won't hurt. Okay, did you have another question?
I do. Marianne Drake says, what's the advantage of using separate chains rather than winding it in the total warp?
None if you know, well, in this case, none if you know where they're going. But I hadn't decided if I was going to include the ecru or if I was, or how wide the stripes were going to be or anything. When I was winding my warp, I had decided to do the ecru separately, partly just so I could do this demonstration. But if you, in this case where you just have a few individual threads, I would normally, and you were planning in advance where they were going to go, I would wind them right into the chain. But if you're doing something like a double-faced project where you effectively have two separate warps that will each have their own threading and they just happen to be interleaved all the way across, then it's often a lot easier to wind those two warps, those two layers separately, because they may have their own color order. They may have their own, color order. It's the situation I've been in. And they have their own threading. So it's convenient to have the two sets of threads separated for the threading process too. That doesn't apply here. This is not a particularly good use of this maneuver that I am performing. It's really just to demonstrate the possibilities. Any other questions? Hello?
Hello?
Oh, sorry. I was muted. Yes, I have a question. Yikes. I was just yapping away. Courtney Mitchell says, can you please explain the warp stick again for new people?
So when I dress my loom from back to front, I use a rattle in the beater rather than on the back beam. And then all of the loops that go, so I lay the warp into the rattle, and all those loops at the end of the warp need to be gathered up and go onto the apron rod at the back of the loom. And I have found that it is much more efficient, rather than having them just hanging there, to put them around a stick so that they're already kind of on a rod. And then I could just pick the stick up or make a little space and run a rod down in there. So that's just part of my own personal warping method. And it's not, I haven't seen anybody else that warps from back to front do that, except for people that I've taught. But it works for me.
Thank you. Jan says, is there any limit to the number of rods, apron rods?
There is not, except that the next thing I'm going to have to do after I get this beamed is to thread. And it gets really fiddly to have a whole lot of layers of lease sticks to be threading from. And when I have done it in the past, I've found that 2 is really my limit for what is not frustrating to deal with. And so when I am warping from back to front, I limit myself to 2 chains. When I am warping from front to back, though, you can have all kinds of chains and feed them through the reed and then through the heddles in whatever order you like, as described in the blog post that came out not just this past Friday, but the one before.
All right. Shirley says she's always had the cross in the back. How will you move the cross to the back before threading?
So that is the main reason I like a rattle rather than a reed for rough slaying, because if you rough slay through a reed, you have to do what's called transferring the cross and get the cross from in front of the reed to behind it. But because I have a rattle, which is open at the top, all I have to do is drop the rattle out of the warp and the lease sticks can just slide through the castle. You'll see that, I think, in a previous Live at the Loom, maybe from the Winter Holidays project. I think that's what it must have been. And if I can get this beamed, you'll see it again today. But I don't know that I'll get through beaming by the end of the hour because I have no idea how close we are to the end of the hour. But as you can see here, I have my warp now on the back apron rod. It's spread more or less evenly across with the white ones fed in approximately the right place. So now I'm going to beam the warp as I normally do. I've got warp sticks down here on the floor and I'll get some paper if I run out of sticks, but I need to put tension on it. So I'm going to unhook the chains from the front of the loom and flip them over so that I can put tension on from the back. That's my next step.
All right. Can we, let's see, can we switch over to Carly for a minute?
For sure.
Or you wanna...
Yeah,
okay.
I'm good. I'm done now.
All right, so I'm just
What are you up to, Carly?
moving along. I'm going with, wonder if you could see this green, like light green to this darker green. Then I'm putting in a little bit of gray just to give it a little bit of space. And one thing that I use on the loom to help keep things semi-symmetrical is that there's these little ties, at least on Ashford has these. So this splits up the space in thirds. And so if I'm warping pretty much the whole width, kind of a design hack is splitting something into thirds is usually really attractive. So if I wanted to put like a zinger stripe in, I could do it right here at this third mark. It'll give it this really cool sort of interesting, little whatever. But it's, it's part of the Fibonacci sequence where you have 2 + 1 = 3. So I already have kind of like these little guides right here. The other thing is that all the Ashford looms have a little dot right after the name Ashford, and that is your center point. So I know when I get to this area, I'm about third way through. So I could design this third. And then once I get to the center area, I know that once I get to that dot, I know I'm in the middle. So that helps me visually design my warp as I go. The other thing you can do, which is really fun, is if you have like a lot of different colors, is I will draw stripes on a piece of paper and just tape the paper to my pedal. And then it's like paint by number, it's like warp by number. So you could come up with a really cool design sequence. So that was another option that I can do too. But going along, about ready to add my first little, my first couple stripes using the hand spun yarn that I made. So I'm excited. I put a little bit of gray between it. So it's like green, then there's a little gray, and then I'll add this fun little thing of fuzzy green. So I'm hoping that the gray kind of helps it pop a little bit. Let's see here. So I got those two. So that means I need to go through. Let's see. I'm going through this one. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going in through this. Yes, and it's not covering anything. Perfect.
Carly, Beth from Wyoming says, thanks for showing that little weighing trick. You could use that while you're at the warping board as well. And she'll use, oh, Janet's trick of adding a little extra warp when she's missed something while warping her board. She'd like to say that doesn't happen, but it does every once in a while. Imagine that.
I know. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Every time something goes wrong and you fix it, you learn something new.
True.
Yep.
You never have any problems, then you'll never really, you know. I think that's why I'm so sloppy, is I'm like, oh, now I have a problem. Just like Tian's blog post, you know.
Exactly. I was thinking of that too. I am discovering now that normally I flip my warp over the castle and put tension on the back, but that was not going to give me good even tension. Things were going to get too tangly. So I'm going to have to put tension on from the front. And that means either doing crank and yank, which means so no tension at all, and one revolution around the warp beam, and then come up here and put tension on everything evenly, pull on everything, and then let go and crank again. Or I could set up a trapeze and weight these, but I'm thinking crank and yank is probably my way to go. That is not normally my choice. I don't like not having tension on things, but short of calling my husband downstairs and asking him to turn the crank while I put tension on, that might be my best choice. So I'm going to start with that. And yeah, so that's why things got moved around again.
And we're watching you right now, Janet.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go to the back and I'm going to crank, and then I'm going to come back to the front and I will yank.
That was one turn.
Yeah, and I can feel there's something really tight there. So I'm gonna, and I've got these two separate chains, so I'm gonna work with each one separately. I don't know which one had the tight thing. 6 will move fine through this one now. Oh, it looks like there's probably something kind of tight in here. I have a couple of loose pink threads. It looks like they're the very first threads of the chain. So I snap and I strum, and that usually gets the tangles out. It's you might require a little more effort in a situation like this where I've got lots of different yarns and textures. But on a smooth warp where the yarns are all similar, then there's very little of that required to get all the tangles out. So now let's see. Yep, these will move again. So I will I'm going to take out my choke, or not choke ties, but these ties here. So the fact that I'm going to have to do this crank and yank and fiddle with the, straighten out my tension and stuff, not a surprise for a stash warp. And also one of the reasons, again, that I really like to keep my stash warps short, because then I have less of this to do. So as you can see, I don't know if you can see, I've got my foot up here on the breast beam and I'm pulling hard to get all that slack out off the back beam. That's crank and yank. All right, now back to the back again. And I'll just keep repeating that process until it's all beamed.
We are at 3:58, so we have 2 minutes. Let's see. We have a question from 2 questions. Lori says she saw in a Facebook group about winding on the wolf looms with the break off. Do you do that, Janet?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it's important too. And I realized as I just did that last turn that I had my foot on the brake release, and that's a bad idea. I used to not worry about it, but then one of the looms in the studio got a big groove cut into the brake drum because of the friction from the cable from beaming. So now, since I have experienced firsthand the damage it can do, yes, I do make sure to keep my foot on the brake release as I'm beaming.
Great. Joy says she forgot to wind threads on both sides for a floating warp. How would you suggest adding a floating warp after the warp is wound on the beam?
That is a question I'm not sure I can get my head around and explain an answer to while I'm multitasking. Can you ask it again, either in the forums or at the Q&A on Wednesday?
Yes, please, Joy. And that is the end of questions and really the end of our time today. Carly,
Okay.
I'm gonna unspotlight you so you're both together now. Janet is cranky or yanking now.
Yep.
Carly's making pretty stuff happen on her rigid huddle.
Whoa. That'll be interesting.
And won't you know it? I don't have myself logged in. Let's see how fast I can find what's coming up next.
I think it's Q&A on Wednesday.
Yes, it is.
And I think we do this again next Sunday.
Yes, we do.
Following Monday is peer support.
Perfect.
Awesome.
So I hope we'll see you all very soon. Thanks for coming to another Live at the Loom. Always fun as usual.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
Janet.
Bye.
everybody.
Oh, how pretty. I haven't been able to see yours. Oh,
I haven't been able to see yours either. I really want to. Here's my phoenix. And here's my folds coming up here. So in spite of the fiddlies, it looks like it's going to go on relatively smoothly without too much trouble. Good. I was afraid I was going to have to sneak down here and fix it all off camera.
All right. Well, as the world turns, we'll see you next week.
All righty. Bye, folks.
All right.